Hello everyone. Today I'm going to introduce you to an elf, a Highland elf named Wee Dougie. Wee Dougie is a character created by the author David George Douglas. David now lives in New Zealand, but lived for nearly 70 years in Scotland. And it's from his time and experiences in Scotland that have helped him to develop the character Wee Dougie and his friends. And we hope that you will come to love them. So without further ado, let's introduce you to this special elf. Wee Dougie, Santa's Highland Elf. One grey, misty morning, deep in the Highlands of Scotland, in the small village of Drumbodnod, an elf called Wee Dougie was awoken, as usual, having his face licked by Shugal, his pet haggis. It was late winter, early spring, but in the Scottish Highlands there can be 4 seasons in an hour, so we best not dwell on that. Wee Dougie had rescued Shugal many years ago when the haggis was being hunted by some nasty men with even nastier dogs, and, tearing round the side of a hill, had jumped straight into Dougie's arms. They fell together in a heap beside an old rabbit burrow, and Dougie, quickly grabbing hold of Shugal, squirmed deep down into the twists and turns of the burrow, leaving the dogs yelping angrily up above. The haggis shook the dust off himself, turned to Dougie and explained, "Thank you, kind sir. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Shugal MacDougall of Auchenboogle, and I shall forever be in your debt." The haggis had remained his faithful pet ever since, and only used his full title when in the company of others. It didn't bother Wee Dougie that the other elves looked at Shugal in amusement, with his 2 long legs on one side and 2 shorter on the other. As haggis spend their lives running round and round steep Scottish hillsides, their legs have adapted this way over several thousand years. Wee Dougie splashed his face in pure mountain dew, a secret only known to elves back then. It helped to keep elves looking young. Wee Dougie was 178 years old, but he only looked 90. He remembered that today the Elf Council was meeting to decide which one of them would travel to the North Pole this year to help Santa get all the presents ready for Christmas morning. He put on his best tartan smock with red bobble shoes and matching bobble hat. Wee Dougie knew he was next in line for this honour, but it would do no harm to look smart for the elders, those elves aged 250 years and more. Other elves all over the world would be meeting today to confirm which of their clan would be making this epic journey. On opening the front door, Wee Dougie could see there had been another fall of snow, so he nipped back in for his skis, recycled staves from an old whiskey barrel, put on his well-used Highlander shawl, strapped Shugal up on his back, and set off. They were making their way to the Hall of Tillylair, the ancient elf gathering place, named after Brahan Tilly, their leader when the clan first discovered this mystical glen of Kilkettle. The pair passed squirrels breakfasting on hidden acorns and a hedgehog poking his snout out from beneath a snowdrift, but he quickly disappeared on hearing the swish of Wee Dougie's skis. At the crossroads he met up with his best pals, Gallus, Bampot, Egypt and Crabbit, and they laughed and joked all the way to the hall. The sun was still low in the sky when they reached Tillylair, but they were pleased to see smoke curling up out of the chimney and having stacked their staves under an overhang, were soon inside the warm chamber, enjoying a cup of honey-sweetened mead made from a well-tested elf recipe called Corby Slap. Elves had been drinking this concoction for hundreds of years to stave off colds and other aches and pains. Thankfully, the gathering went well, and after the usual huffing and puffing by the elders, the clan chieftain Callum Kilkettle of Kilkettle stood up behind the high table and announced, "We, the elders of the Kilkettle clan, had agreed that Wee Dougie will be our representative this year as Santa's Highland helper." A large tureen of warm Corby Slap was passed around with much handshaking and congratulations to Dougie from his fellow elves. Shugal kept well out of things during these proceedings to avoid being trod on by any over-enthusiastic well-wishers. Eventually, Wee Dougie found Shugal and whispered, "Come on, let's away home to Drumbodnod and get organised." Wee Dougie's home was an old badger set, long deserted when he found it, but it was now warm and snug, with a door disguised as an exposed tree root. It didn't take long to get things in order for the off, and Shugal helped as best he could, although his mismatched legs kept putting things at an odd angle. Wee Dougie had never ventured far from Drumbodnod, but knew that the early part of their journey would take them across the open spaces of northern Scotland to the east coast. When it was time to go, he saddled up Morag, his smaller than usual Shetland pony, and he and Shugal waved goodbye to all the villagers who'd gathered to wish them well. Callum Kilkettle of Kilkettle had given Wee Dougie a roll of parchment containing a goodwill message to Santa on behalf of the clan, and in it hinted to Santa that if any of his reindeer were feeling poorly, Morag could step in and pull his sleigh, no problem. Wee Dougie rolled it up carefully and placed it well down in Morag's saddlebags. Then they headed off down the glen, Wee Dougie waving his bobble hat to the villagers before rounding the bend into the great unknown. Morag set a good pace, and being so close to the ground, never put a foot wrong. Elves don't mix well with humans, and Morag had a super-sensitive sixth sense which warned them when any humans were about, so they could hunker down out of sight until their way was clear. They stopped to rest and have something to eat beside a clear Highland burn and watched the puddocks, humans call them frogs, leaping from stone to stone, croaking as they went. Their journey took them into a near vertical cleft in the land known locally as the Great Glen. It contained deep, deep lochs, one of which reputedly was home to Nessie, an ancient sea creature who had been trapped here long ago when the land changed shape and the sea route was blocked. Morag proved her worth every day, carrying Wee Dougie and Shugal mile after Highland mile and giving them early warning whenever they were about to come into contact with humans. At the northern end of the Great Glen, the adventurers crossed onto the peninsula known as the Black Isle and passed the Clootie Well, a place of legend and mystery signposted by rag-festooned trees. After another night in the open, under the stars, but protected by the spirits of the well, they proceeded towards the coast. Stopping in the fairy glen near Rosemarkie, Wee Dougie used a handy stone to hammer home a coin into the bark of the enchanted tree for good luck and as an offering to the fairies. The intrepid trio reached the coast on a wooded headland not far from a lighthouse and sat down to await developments. In all his 178 years, Wee Dougie had never set eyes on the ocean, or, as this was, a sea, and the sight of it filled him with awe. As they stood on the shoreline, they became aware of activity in the water and noticed some sea creatures close to the rocks. It turned out to be a local pod of dolphins, and the friends were invited to step on board for the short ride to what was going to be their main mode of transport for the sea crossing. Wee Dougie and Shugel easily manoeuvred themselves astride one dolphin, but Morag was far more used to having someone sit astride her, not the other way around. Her little hoofs gripped her dolphin tightly, and her eyes sparkled when the dolphin pod began to play around them as they headed out to deeper water. They soon grew near to what they thought was a smooth, dark island. But as the dolphins rounded the head, a spout of steamy vapour blew out from the top. A large eye seemed to follow them to the other side, where another eye glinted at their arrival. The large island was in fact a whale, and the dolphins swam in close so that their passengers could transfer onto the great mammal. Then off they swam, slapping their tails in farewell. The whale introduced himself simply as Wally, but the haggis, as usual, gave back his full title. "Pleased to meet you. I'm Shugel McDougal of Och and Boogle." Wally rolled back both great eyes in amusement before commenting, "You just look like a wee puddin' to me, son." Shugel puffed himself up before uttering, "Haggis are an endangered species, I'll have you know." "No surprise there then," said Wally. "Up you get." Wee Dougie was a bit nervous as he clambered to reach the beast's broad back, but Morag was in her element and appeared quite sure-footed as her hoofs found grip on the barnacles and other crustaceans attached to the shiny, wet surface. They felt a shudder, and the whale began to make headway into the waves, veering north-eastward toward the lands of the Vikings. Wee Dougie had heard tales of these warrior humans who wore horned helmets and carried large war axes. But the elders had assured him that Vikings were now consigned to history, and that the people living there now were just normal humans. Morag stood confidently up ahead, but Dougie was beginning to feel a bit queasy, and was soon rummaging in the saddlebags for the Corby slap. A few sips of this magical cure-all, and he soon discovered his sea legs. Then they all began to enjoy their maiden voyage. As day turned to night, strange lights played across the northern sky, and they were entranced by the variety of colours and shapes the aurora made. Wee Dougie now knew he was a long way from home, and it would be many weeks before he again saw his friends back in Drumbodnod. The great whale swam effortlessly, further and further north, passing carefully between large icebergs until they arrived at a huge ice wall. "That's as far as I can take you," said Wally. I can see your next transportation waiting. He's another big fellow. Good luck, and I'll see you on your return journey." The trio stepped onto an ice shelf and turned to see Wally's tail slip quietly beneath the surface. One spout later, and he was gone. "Hello there," growled a deep voice. "My name is Shikdar, similar to my more famous cousin." Wee Dougie, Shugel and Morag came face to face with a mountainous polar bear. They had no idea who the more famous cousin was, but they were very impressed with this one called Shikdar. Dougie did the introductions without any formality, which put Shugel's nose very much out of joint. But one look at the claws extending from those massive paws convinced the haggis to keep his opinions for another time. "It will be my pleasure to deliver you to Santa. He and Mrs. Claus are expecting you," said Shikdar. "Follow me to the sledge transportation waiting up top." The great bear guided them through narrow crevices and fractures, continuing upward until they emerged onto a white plateau. After a short rest, Morag slipped on the special hoofwear and had herself hitched to the sledge. Shikdar told her to follow in his paw marks, and they set a surprisingly good pace, with Wee Dougie and Shugel fur-wrapped behind. Mrs. Claus had provided a hamper filled with seaweed pies, caviar sandwiches, plus reindeer milk yogurt, and some fishy stuff for Shikdar. They didn't stop, but ate on the move, as they had to reach their destination before nightfall. Eventually they saw a flagpole in the distance, and the bear announced, "Here we are." He stood up on his hind legs and let out a mighty roar. They noticed some movement ahead on a low hillside and became aware of bright light increasing as a doorway opened. A red-clad figure emerged into the snow. Santa himself had come out to welcome the little party. Shikdar ushered them forward, and Santa allowed them entry before turning to address the bear. "My friend, would you like to come in and shelter for the night?" "Thank you, Santa, but I must return to the coast for our next arrivals. I'll come several miles before digging myself a snow hole to rest up in," said Shikdar. He quickly disappeared into the falling snow as Santa pushed the door back into place. "Come on then, follow me and we'll find Mrs. Claus. She's been looking forward to all you elves being here and giving her some help in the kitchen." Morag had been hanging back, feeling a bit self-conscious, but Santa quickly noticed this and led her to the reindeer stable, not far from the entrance. The deer looked at her with curiosity, as they'd never seen such a small Shetland pony before. But Santa told Rudolph to find Morag some feed and a warm place to rest after all her hard work. "You look after her, my boy. She's worth her weight in gold," said Santa. Mrs. Claus was very interested to hear that Wee Dougie and Shugel had come from Scotland. "Isn't that where those kind people leave you a strange drink on the mantelpiece instead of milk, and it makes you even merrier than normal?" she asked Santa. "Well, my dear, it would be very rude of me to ignore such good manners, but I must admit I leave the driving to Rudolph when we get to Scotland. he replied. That reminds me, said Wee Dougie, taking a parchment roll out of his satchel. My clan leader asked me to present this goodwill message to you. Santa's cheeks reddened with embarrassment as he took hold. I'll read it when there's a more quiet moment, he said. Santa could see they were tired, and finding them a plump, comfy mattress told them, Get a good night's sleep, and we'll find you plenty of things to help with in the morning. Wee Dougie and Shule slept like logs, and felt much revived in the morning. After checking on Morag, they made their way to Santa's workshop by following the noise of chattering elves who had already started on their chores for the day. Santa's elves don't stick to the one job all the time, but chop and change to keep up their interest. And so Dougie set to and mastered many of the knacks, shortcuts, and good quality guides for toy assembly. Over the following weeks, the pals enjoyed the company of the other elves, with Santa often popping in to check on their progress, and Mrs. Claus coming round with cookies or other bites to keep them going until the next mealtime. Morag, not wanting to be left out or bored, would accompany Shikdar to the coast to pick up provisions and help haul them back to the North Pole. The Great Bear was very impressed by the little pony's stamina and her ability to pick out the best way to get round an obstacle. If he was honest, he also enjoyed her company once he got used to her strange accent. There's not a great difference between Shetland pony talk and polar bear talk, as their homelands are only a few hundred miles apart. As Christmas Day approached, the workshop noise increased, and the elves busily scampered about with the final finishings. Wee Dougie noticed Santa had a worried look on his face as he made his usual visit. What's the matter, Santa? You look a bit concerned. Santa turned his kindly face to Dougie and said, Yes, I'm afraid Rudolph is not too well, and he's taken to his stall in the stables with a hot water bottle. It's Christmas Eve, and I don't think he's well enough to lead my sleigh tonight. What can I do? Santa stood gazing at Wee Dougie's tartan smock and explained, Of course! Why didn't I think of this before? Callum Kilkettle of Kilkettle recommended Morag if any of the reindeer were taken poorly. Rudolph won't want to let all the boys and girls down, but I'm sure if I can get Shikdar to help me explain how versatile and talented your small pony is, he'll realise that would be an ideal answer, and Rudolph can then take his time to recover. Morag wondered why Santa had accompanied Shikdar as the pair squeezed into her stall. The bear settled himself in a corner, and Santa sat down on a stool and began to explain his problem. Your friend here has told me how impressive you've been, so that, together with a good word from your clan leader, has convinced me that you could be the one to lead the team tonight. Morag was stunned and looked at Shikdar, then back to Santa, before stammering out, If you really think I can help, I'll do my best, but can Wee Dougie come with us? That night, to much cheering from all the elves and Mrs. Claus, the little pony was hitched up as the team leader in front of Donner, Blitzen, and the rest of Santa's reindeer, and off they went up into the night sky. Morag was a bit nervous at first, but soon began to enjoy herself, directing the team through the Milky Way with her little hoofs sparking off the stars she used as stepping stones to their first destination. Santa's night was just beginning, and many hours would pass before the very tired team of reindeer and pony returned with their precious passengers to the North Pole. Job done, they all slept throughout the next day and night, and then Santa met up with Wee Dougie, Shugal and Morag to thank them all for their hard work and announced, "Now I have Shikdar waiting at the entrance, and if you get started straight away, you'll be back in Drumbodnod for your special night of Hogmanay to see the new year in." And do you know, that's just what they did. The end. Or is it just the beginning?